covered in today's China Truths.
On paper, the People's Liberation Army Navy Type 003 Fujian was supposed to be the ship that changed history. 80,000 tons of steel, ambition, and political symbolism. The first Chinese aircraft carrier built from the keel up with electromagnetic catapults. The first non-American flat top marketed as capable of breaking U.S. naval dominance in the Pacific. In Beijing's imagination, this was not just a warship. It was a statement, a floating declaration that the age of American sea power was ending and that a new empire had arrived. State media called it the island chain crusher. Analysts loyal to his party claimed it would push the U.S. Navy back beyond Guam. Propaganda videos showed sleek fighters launching effortlessly into the sky, radar arrays glowing, deck crews moving with choreographed precision. The message was simple and relentless. China had caught up and perhaps even surpassed the West. But war has a cruel habit of exposing lies. In December 2025, the Taiwan Strait transformed from a political pressure zone into something far darker. On December 30th, Beijing announced Justice Mission 2025, a massive fire encirclement of Taiwan. The scale was unlike anything seen before. According to Ministry of National Defense in Taipei, 130 PLA aircraft flooded the airspace. 14 warships and 8 government vessels sealed off the surrounding waters. Missiles, drones, radar platforms, everything was in motion. Everything, except the most important asset of all. There were no aircraft carriers. The Liaoning sat idle in the north. The Shandong was nowhere near the battle space. And the Fujian, the flagship, the pride of the fleet, the ship built precisely for this scenario, had simply disappeared. Not damaged in combat, not shadowing the fleet from afar. Gone. This was not a coincidence, it was a confession. The truth emerged not through leaks, but through open admission. Taiwan's defense minister, Wellington Koo, told lawmakers that the Fujian was believed to be carrying no aircraft and had already turned back to its manufacturer on Changsing Island in Shanghai. The carrier had been recalled for modifications. In plain language, it was broken. Navies do not send capital ships back to the factory during an active blockade unless something is seriously wrong. This single decision tore apart years of propaganda in one stroke. The gap between what Beijing claimed and what its engineers could actually deliver was no longer theoretical. It was operational and humiliating. Worse still, this was not new behavior. It was a pattern. Back in 2019, the Shandong was commissioned with fireworks, speeches, and wall-to-wall coverage from China Central Television. The carrier entered service in Sanya amid triumphant headlines. Days later, it quietly vanished, sailing north to the Dalian shipyard, where it spent most of the following year undergoing repairs and retrofits. Defects were hidden, old footage was reused, the illusion of readiness was maintained. The Fujian followed the same script, but under far higher stakes. This time, the disappearance happened not in peacetime, but during the most dangerous Taiwan crisis in decades. And yet, even after the ship had already limped back to dry dock, propaganda did not stop. Days later, the CCTV aired a glossy segment featuring PLA officer Bao Yu, confidently declaring that the Fujian's electromagnetic launch system allowed continuous, uninterrupted sorties, claiming it was superior to American steam catapults. The contrast was almost surreal. On television, the ship was conquering the oceans. In reality, it was motionless, powerless, and empty. To understand how this happened, you have to look beyond the hull and into the ideology driving the design. At the center of the story is Ma Weiming, often praised as the father of China's electromagnetic launch technology. Ma convinced Xi Jinping to abandon proven steam catapults in favor of a revolutionary medium-voltage, direct current system powered by massive banks of supercapacitors. The pitch was seductive, skipped decades of incremental development, and leapfrogged the United States overnight. It was a political dream. It was also an engineering nightmare. Years passed, tests were conducted, but one thing never happened: a public launch of a live fighter jet. Not once. During the Fujian's carefully staged commissioning ceremony, broadcast to the world, the catapult launched only a deadweight sled. No pilot, no aircraft, no risk. That decision spoke louder than any speech. Engineers do not avoid live launches unless they fear failure. In real combat conditions, full speed, active phased array radars, electronic warfare systems drawing power simultaneously, the Fujian's electrical grid becomes unstable. When the capacitors discharge, voltage collapses ripple through the ship, threatening radar shutdowns and fire control failures. To prevent a total blackout, engineers are forced to slow recharge cycles, destroying the possibility of rapid launch operations. This is why Chinese state media footage is so carefully edited. You never see continuous deck cycles. One aircraft launches, cut, another angle, cut again. The pauses, the cooling, the waiting, the instability are always hidden. But war does not allow editing. A carrier that cannot generate sustained sorties is not a carrier. It is a liability. The warning signs did not stop there. The commissioning ceremony itself looked less like a military milestone and more like a staged funeral. Senior naval leadership was conspicuously absent. Hu Zhongming, the commander of the PLA Navy, did not attend. Neither did key theater commanders or political commissars. In China's political culture, officials fight desperately to be photographed beside success. They disappear only when they sense disaster. Instead of admirals, the deck was filled with aides, secretaries, and decorative displays. Cameras lingered not on combat readiness, but on ornate cakes and ceremonial pageantry. The symbolism was impossible to miss. The bakery worked flawlessly, but the flight deck did not. The technical consequences are devastating. China's primary carrier fighter, the J-15 Flying Shark, is the heaviest carrier-based fighter in service anywhere in the world. Launching it with full fuel and heavy anti-ship missiles demands flawless, high-energy catapult performance. The Fujian cannot reliably deliver that. As a result, aircraft must launch light, half-fuel, limited weapons, severely reducing range and lethality. This creates an unsolvable paradox. To extend range, fighters need aerial refueling. But a tanker-configured J-15 is even heavier than a strike fighter. If the catapult cannot reliably launch a heavy fighter, it certainly cannot launch a tanker. The air wing becomes tethered to the ship, unable to project power beyond nearby waters. Even worse, the problem grounds the KJ-600, China's answer to the E-2 Hawkeye. This aircraft cannot take off without a catapult. Without it, the fleet is blind, unable to detect incoming threats or coordinate complex operations. A carrier that is blind, short-ranged, and lightly armed is not a deterrent. It is a stage prop. And this failure explains something far more alarming: Beijing's sudden turn toward nuclear escalation. According to NTD-TV, China has accelerated long-range missile deployments and shifted toward a launch-on-warning posture. This is not the behavior of a power confident in its conventional forces. It is compensation. The Fujian was supposed to be the bridge between peace and apocalypse, the conventional tool that could pressure the U.S. Navy without triggering global war. Instead, it sits sidelined at Jiangnan shipyard, awaiting fixes that physics itself may not allow. What remains is the most expensive floating museum ever built, a monument not to strength but to hubris. A reminder that technology cannot be commanded by decree, and that reality always collects its debt with interest. Trump takes control of Venezuelan oil. 2 Chinese supertankers turn back following an order by President Trump to arrest Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and assert control over the country's oil exports. New shipping data shows that 2 Chinese supertankers originally bound for Venezuela have turned back toward Asia after remaining anchored in the North Atlantic for several weeks. According to Reuters, the 2 very large crude carriers, VLCCs, sailing under the Chinese flag are the Xingye and Thousand Sunny. Both vessels were specifically designed for the Venezuela-China route and are typically used to transport Venezuelan crude oil to China. Each tanker has a capacity of up to 2 million barrels. Since the outbreak of the Venezuelan crisis, however, both vessels had been anchored in the North Atlantic for weeks, awaiting further instructions. The latest shipping data from LSE now shows that the 2 tankers have reversed course and are heading back to Asia. The report notes that China, Venezuela's largest oil buyer, has not received any shipments from the country's state-owned oil company, PDVSA, since last month. This suggests that under the U.S. blockade, Venezuela may be unable to export oil directly to its major customers in the short term. According to internal PDVSA documents cited in the report, China was Venezuela's largest oil destination last year, receiving approximately 642,000 barrels per day, about three-quarters of the country's total oil exports. On January 3rd, U.S. military forces reportedly entered Venezuela, detained President Maduro, and swiftly took control of the country's oil export operations. President Trump has since stated publicly that the era in which China used debt to secure cheap Venezuelan oil is over. He added that the United States will now oversee Venezuelan oil sales, and that if China wants oil, it can buy it from us. Several Trump administration officials told Reuters that part of the U.S. action against Maduro was intended to curb China's expanding influence in what Washington considers America's strategic backyard.
Please share your thoughts in the comments section below. We will keep reporting on the COVID surge in China, so don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell to get the latest videos. And thank you for tuning in.